All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Joshua Colby. I am the instructor for Pima Medical School's critical thinking class. I wanted to make a video as we are now in week 3 of the course and we are learning about critical thinking and language. Let me go ahead and share the screen and we'll jump into this week's lesson and information. Maybe. All right, so this week we're talking about critical thinking and language. Language and critical thinking kind of have a strange relationship. If we kind of think deep about language, um, it's a weird thing. It's we make noises with our mouths, we make symbols on a page, and yet somehow we derive meaning from them. And where does that meaning come from? Is is a strange and kind of complicated question with answers ranging from cultural traditions passed on. So why is a chair called a chair and not a table? That was a decision, a linguistic decision made that has been passed on throughout time. um, Language is complicated because it is in a sense arbitrary. It meaning comes from the person, or um, meaning can be generated or interpreted by the listener, the receiver of a message. Language is fluid. Words don't necessarily mean the same thing to the same people at the same time. Language changes, meanings of words change. For example, I use the word cool all the time, and I cannot remember the last time I used it in terms of temperature. But that I mean it like awesome, neat, nice, cool, right? But that didn't come that meaning of the word cool came about in the early 1900s with the rise of the jazz age. So the idea here is that language is a little bit more complicated than we might originally think. And that's before we start contemplating things like nonverbal language, um, our body language, our tone, our mannerisms, our facial expressions, all of that stuff. Um, when you start to really think about it, it's pretty clear, becomes clear why we are misunderstood a lot, why we misunderstand other people, right? So those are kind of the ideas that we're going to be working with this week. Our work for the week includes the Smart Book 3 reading, Chapter 3. It was due yesterday, Saturday the 15th. If you didn't do it, I think I went in and added a 72-hour extension to everybody that missed it. Remember, there's a 10% penalty per late day, but you should have the extension. You should be able to go in and do it. If you didn't do it and you don't have an extension, email me so I can add the extension for you, but I'm pretty sure I got everybody. We also have the animal language discussion. First post needed to be in yesterday. Make sure you get your replies to your classmates in by Tuesday. The animal language discussion is asking you to think about the role of nonverbal or body language in your lives, and then also sort of just cultural differences in language, as well as kind of broaching into the topic of animal communication and whether or not animals can really communicate. I think that's one of the most interesting things to think about. We, we meaning scientists. I don't know why I said we. Scientists are discovering more and more information about just how extensive animal communication is, and not even just animals. We're also learning about like plant communication and the idea that some sort of like linguistic message can be passed along through plants and animals. Um, it's interesting stuff. So those are kind of the ideas that we're working with. I really want to take a look right now in this video at the nonverbal language assignment, which is due Tuesday, the 18th. So let me bring that up real quick. Here we go. All right, so due Tuesday the 18th by 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time. It says read the section of Think Chapter 3 through your smart book, which discusses Lance Armstrong's interview with Oprah. Body language plays an important role in the juror's perception of a defendant's guilt. If this had been a trial, discuss whether the jurors should have been allowed to see Armstrong making his confession or if a law should be put in place that sets the defendant out of the juror's view so as not to allow the defendant's body language to influence the juror's decision. Write a well-developed research-based essay, notice that, research-based essay, of at least 500 words that analyzes nonverbal language and the courtroom setting in order to answer the question of whether or not jurors should be allowed to see the defendant in a trial. Okay, so this is your main prompt. The Lance Armstrong thing is to kind of get you thinking about nonverbal language and body language. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's in the Smart Book. You can look it up on YouTube as well. Lance Armstrong did an interview with Oprah where his body language and his verbal language were telling very different stories. So the question here is, the main question you need to answer in your prompt or in your response in a 500-word essay is, due to nonverbal language, should jurors be allowed to see a defendant in a trial? And then consider the roles of prosecution and defense, nonverbal language, language manipulation or language games, and the use of rhetorical devices. Make sure your paper is written in APA format with APA resources, meaning APA citations, references, etc. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about this, how to approach this. First of all, because it is a research-based essay, that means that while I'm asking for your opinion on this, I'm asking for your opinion based on research, not your opinion just as you, a person reading a prompt and responding to the prompt. What that means is get yourself out of it. Get rid of first person point of view, no I, me, my language. This is an academic essay, so write it using research to support your ideas and write it in third person point of view. The second thing is, when you read this prompt, you might immediately have an answer. A lot of students immediately have the answer, well, of course, that's the way our legal system is. Okay, well, that's a fallacy of tradition. Just because something is doesn't mean it should be, right? Just because it's always been this way doesn't mean it should always be this way. So what are we really getting at with this prompt? Think about what can happen when a group of jurors look at a defendant. If the defendant is very nervous, what does that mean? If he's fidgeting, if he seems, sweating, if he seems nervous, does that mean that he's guilty? Does that mean he's nervous because he's done the thing, whatever he's on trial for? Or is he nervous because he's on trial in the first place? Is he nervous because there's people watching him and it's a stressful situation? Could you tell? Can you tell? Are you capable of, are we as people, is the average juror so good at analyzing nonverbal language that they can figure out what it means? There have been court cases in the past in which the guilty verdict was found based mostly on the defendant's nonverbal language, how they behaved in the courtroom. Not so much on evidence, not so much on witnesses, anything. Just essentially jurors saying, well, he really seemed guilty. But isn't that crazy? A little bit? Like, oh, he seemed guilty, therefore he was. So think about this, right? People, this way oversimplification of this is people aren't dogs. If I come home, I don't have a dog right now. My dog lives at my parents' house, but when he was younger, right, I have a golden retriever. When I could come home, if there was toilet paper shredded up, and my puppy would be in the corner with his head against the wall, looking guilty as can be. That doesn't really work for people, right? People can seem guilty and be innocent. People can seem innocent and be guilty. Then bring in things like biases, racism, prejudices of any kind. I know the legal system tries to weed that stuff out for jury members, but it remains, right? So should people be allowed to see the defendant? On the other hand, maybe people are good at reading. Maybe people are good at reading body language. Maybe jurors are good at reading body language and nonverbal communication. And maybe that stuff is important to a trial. The point here is to do a little research. to not just base your answer on your own opinion, to especially not base it on whatever your gut reaction is. When I comment on this paper, whether you decide yes, they should or no, they shouldn't be seen, I'm going to ask you questions. I'm going to put questions in the feedback because I think you should, for every point you make, you should think about what if there's a person like whispering in your ear, being like, okay, yeah, but for each of these, right? For every little point. The next thing I want to highlight here is notice that while the main question is asking you to think about whether or not jurors should be allowed to see the defendant in a trial, there are these little sub questions. Consider the role of the prosecution and the defense. Consider nonverbal language. Consider language manipulation in games, and consider rhetorical devices. Each one of these little things, these little points, should be given some careful consideration in your essay. If I were you, I would probably write it like a 5-paragraph essay, where you kind of maybe just number each of these little questions and give them some detail. Okay, so those are the big things. Get yourself out of it. No first person point of view. Never use second person your statements in academic writing. 2, make sure this is research-based, not just your opinion as a person who read a prompt and thought about it for 15 seconds before you started writing. That's not going to fly. You need to do some research. 3, incorporate APA in text citations, an APA reference page, APA headings, all of that stuff. There are guides on the left side of the Blackboard menu. There is a website called OWL Purdue APA. It is by far the best APA instructional guide on the internet that I know of. 3, make sure that you are answering each, I don't know, are we still on 3? It might be 4. Make sure that you're answering each of these little individual questions while also addressing the main one. Finally, well, the Lance Armstrong thing is kind of a lead-in thing. It's up to you the extent to which you want to play with it. You could write this essay without ever talking about Lance Armstrong, or you could write this essay while talking about Lance Armstrong. It's up to you, as long as you're addressing the main question about whether or not jurors should see the defendant, and also addressing these little sub questions of the prompt. Okay, that's it. The assignment is due Tuesday night. Make sure you get it turned in on time. Remember, there is a 72-hour late window that you can turn work in, but it is a 10% penalty per day. Make sure you get your discussion posts in. I think that's it. If you have questions about anything, please email me and I will be happy to help you out. Hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and I will talk to you next time.